Why was she the only one still awake when the others finally drifted into uneasy sleep? The barracks had gone quiet hours ago, yet her eyes refused to close. Outside, the desert winds moved across the base like whispers, lifting the fine dust into pale spirals beneath the security lights. The glow painted everything in that haunting yellow-gray hue, the kind of color that always made her think of in-between places, places where the living and the dead might cross paths. She sat on the edge of her bunk, boots still on, rifle leaning against the steel frame. The radio beside her crackled once, then hissed back into silence. She thought of switching it off, but some part of her needed the static, the reminder that the world outside her thoughts still existed. Everyone else had turned in. Corporal Ramos with his nervous laugh and half-finished stories. Lewis, the medic, whose hand trembled whenever he tried to roll a cigarette but never when stitching someone's wound. Even Captain Arlen, who pretended he never slept but had been snoring lightly for the last 40 minutes. But not her. Her name was Maren. Some called her steady, some called her cold. Most never knew what to call her at all because she rarely gave them reason to. She had long ago learned that silence carried further than words, and tonight her silence had weight. The mission briefing was at dawn. She should have been resting, but her thoughts circled back to the same place over and over. The target, the coordinates, the village with no name where smoke had been rising for 3 days straight. They saw smoke and fire, just another signal of unrest, another threat to be contained. She saw something else. The last chance to hold the line, not for the mission, not even for the flag, for something far more fragile, something no one else here even knew about. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. A sound broke the quiet, boots on gravel outside the tent. She stiffened, hand brushing the grip of her rifle out of habit. The flap shifted, and a figure stepped inside. Lewis. He carried his med bag slung over his shoulder, eyes still heavy with sleep. He stopped when he saw her sitting rigid in the half-dark. "You're still up," he murmured. It wasn't a question. "Couldn't sleep," she said. He studied her for a moment. Then he dropped onto the bunk across from hers, setting the bag down with a soft thud. "You know what Ramos said earlier? He said after this one he's done. Going home. Gonna open some little shop with his brother in Phoenix." She didn't answer. Lewis leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It's always the same before a push. Everyone talks about what comes after, like it's some kind of bargain. If I tell the story enough, maybe fate has to keep me alive to see it." She looked at him then, the dim light catching the tired lines around his eyes. "And what about you?" A half-smile tugged at his lips, weary but genuine. "Me, I just want to sleep without dreams." Silence pressed in again. Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the canvas. He waited as if he expected her to share something of her own, but she couldn't, not yet. Finally, he stood. "Try to rest, Hale, tomorrow, going to burn either way." When he left, the quiet felt heavier. She sat there another hour, unmoving, staring at the shape of her rifle in the shadows. And when she finally lay down, she dreamed, not of war, not of missions, but of a face she had promised herself she would never see again. Dawn came cold. The horizon bled pale orange as the unit assembled at the edge of the strip. The helicopters crouched like waiting predators, rotors groaning to life. The air smelled of fuel, sand, and anticipation. Captain Arlen's voice carried sharp over the engines. Coordinates, objective, containment, extraction. His words were clean, clipped, official. The kind of language that made war sound like logistics. But Maren wasn't listening to the words. She was watching his eyes. The way he avoided hers when he said the casualty estimate. The way his jaw tightened when he mentioned civilian presence near the target zone. He knew something he wasn't saying, and she did too. As they loaded up, Ramos caught her arm. His grin was forced, the kind that only half reached his eyes. "Hey, Hale, when this is done, I'm holding you to a drink. You don't get to keep dodging." She gave a small nod, a promise she had no intention of keeping. The helicopter lifted, thundering skyward. Wind slammed through the open bay, dust whipping their faces. Beneath them, the desert stretched endless, broken only by jagged rock and the thin scars of roads. Ramos shouted a joke over the roar. Lewis rolled his eyes, smiling despite himself. Even Arlen allowed a brief smirk. And Maren, she closed her eyes, listening, not to them, to something deeper, to the pulse beneath her ribs that reminded her of why she was here. Why she couldn't fail. The flight stretched long, the world below shrinking into insignificance. Clouds gathered on the horizon, bruised purple and gray, storm weather. When the village came into view, the chatter stopped. Smoke still curled upward in slow, ugly spirals, black against the morning sky. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. 2 clicks out, brace. They descended fast, blades cutting the air into a scream. Dust erupted as they touched down, swallowing everything in a storm of grit. Shouts, boots hitting earth, weapons raised. And through the chaos, Maren felt it again, the pull, the invisible thread tying her to this place, to what waited inside those smoke-stained walls. But no one else saw it. To them it was just another mission, another line on the map, another day in a war with no end. They saw smoke and fire. She saw something else entirely. And she knew, before this day was over, her silence would cost her. The first shots cracked like whips, sharp and sudden. The world shifted in an instant. Civilians scattered. Shouts in a language half the unit didn't understand. The team fanned out, Arlen barking orders, Lewis dragging cover into place, Ramos already firing bursts down a narrow alley. Maren moved with precision, every step deliberate, but her eyes weren't on the enemy. They were on a doorway across the square, half hidden by rubble. A doorway she recognized. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, the war fell away. All she could see was that door, that memory, that promise. And the weight of what she hadn't told them. Not yet. She raised her rifle. Her hands didn't shake, but inside something cracked. Because she knew what waited beyond that door, and she knew it would change everything. Why did her aim hesitate when it never had before? The doorway across the square burned into her vision, even as gunfire erupted around her. Her finger rested against the trigger, steady, trained, but her eye drifted past the sight, to the shadowed threshold that pulled at her like gravity. "Cover left," Arlen's voice cut through the storm. "Ramos, take the high roof. Lewis, stay low with me." Maren snapped back, swinging her rifle, squeezing 2 precise bursts into the figures advancing from the alley. They dropped, dust rising around their bodies. The rhythm of war, target, breath, fire, carried her muscles like instinct. But the weight inside her chest pressed heavier with every second. Because she knew that door. It had been years, but memory didn't soften edges like people claimed. If anything, it sharpened them. The last time she saw that doorway, she had stood in the same square, not with a rifle but with open hands, begging for a ceasefire that never came. That was another life, another Maren. One she had buried so deeply that no one in this unit, not Ramos with his forced laughter, not Lewis with his gentle questions, not even Arlen with his sharp, searching eyes, knew existed. And now it was here again, the past alive in smoke. "Sniper," Lewis shouted. The warning came too late. A crack split the air, sharp as lightning. Wood splintered inches from Ramos' head as he scrambled across a wall. He swore, ducking. "Top floor left window," Arlen barked. Maren moved before thinking. Her scope found the window, glass shattered, a flash of metal within. She exhaled, squeezed. The shot punched through the space, silence following the shatter. Her unit shouted, scrambled, pushed forward. The chaos blurred, muzzle flashes, fragments of shouted orders, boots hammering broken stone. But still, she felt that pull, that doorway. She forced herself forward, staying in formation, but every step carried her closer. Lewis ducked beside her, breath ragged. "You good?" he asked, eyes sharp even in panic. She gave a curt nod, but inside her thoughts screamed. Because she wasn't good, not at all. The enemy fell back, retreating deeper into the village. The unit followed, pressing through narrow alleys where walls leaned so close they swallowed the sun. The air grew hotter, thicker, filled with grit that scraped the lungs. Ramos cracked another joke, voice strained. "Feels like a vacation spot, huh?" Nobody laughed. They reached the square's far side, regrouping in the shadow of a collapsed wall. Civilians had scattered, but traces remained, a doll in the dust, a cooking pot overturned, a trail of blood leading somewhere unseen. Arlen crouched low, eyes cutting across the group. "We move east, secure the compound. Hale, you're on point." Her gut clenched. On point meant first in, first through the alleys, first through doors. First to face that threshold. "Copy," she said, voice flat. They advanced, step by step, shadows shifting above them. The compound loomed, smoke staining its walls. And there it was again, the doorway. Her boots faltered. Lewis caught the pause just for a second, but long enough. His gaze narrowed. Something wrong. She shook her head quickly, clear. But the words stuck in her throat like ash. Because she remembered what lay beyond that door, or who. The compound door splintered under Arlen's boot. The team surged inside. The air grew darker, thicker, filled with smoke and the metallic tang of spent rounds. Maren swept corners, rifle cutting arcs through shadow. Figures darted, weapons raised, shouts echoing. The fight flared again, sharp bursts of fire, shouts, the thud of bodies hitting dirt. Her pulse hammered, but not from the battle. From the door at the far end of the hall. The one slightly ajar, edges burned black. Her throat tightened. She fired, reloaded, fired again. The motions came automatic, drilled deep, but her eyes kept dragging back to that burned frame. And then between the chaos, she heard it. A voice. Small, fragile, a child. Her blood ran cold. The world snapped into fragments, Lewis shouting for cover, Ramos cursing as he pulled shrapnel from his arm, Arlen's orders slicing through the haze. But beneath it all, that sound. A child's cry, muffled, coming from behind the door. Her rifle shook for the first time in years. She remembered. God help her, she remembered. Not here, not this place. Another burned doorway. Another child's voice she had failed to save. She had buried that memory under duty, under silence, under years of cold precision. But memory doesn't forgive. It waits. Her knees locked. The smoke seemed to thicken. Lewis grabbed her shoulder, eyes fierce. "Hale, stay with me." She blinked, breath sharp. "I'm here," she forced out. But her voice trembled. The firefight ebbed, then stilled. Silence stretched. The compound floor was littered with bodies, weapons scattered, smoke curling toward the open roof. Arlen strode forward, scanning the hall. His voice came low, steady. "Secure the rooms, check every corner." The others moved, but Maren didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on that door. The cry came again, softer, weak. She stepped forward, rifle raised, each step heavier than the last. Her hand trembled against the grip. Lewis called after her, but she didn't answer. She reached the frame, pushed the door. The hinge groaned. Inside, shadows, smoke, and a shape small crouched in the corner. A boy no older than 8. Dirt smeared his face, eyes wide, lips cracked. He looked up at her, terrified, fragile, alive. Her chest clenched so hard, she almost dropped the rifle. Because he looked exactly like the one she hadn't saved. Her silence screamed inside her skull. "Maren," Lewis' voice came behind her. He had followed, standing in the doorway now. His eyes flicked from her rifle to the boy, to her face, and something changed in his gaze. Recognition. Suspicion. She lowered the weapon. Her breath came ragged, uneven. The boy didn't move. He just stared, chest rising shallow. Lewis stepped closer, voice hushed. You know something, don't you? Her jaw locked, she couldn't speak, couldn't admit it, not here, not now. Because if she told them the truth, why she knew this place, why she knew that doorway, everything would break. The mission, the team, herself. So she stayed silent. Lewis' eyes hardened, but he didn't push. Not yet. Arlen's voice echoed down the hall. Report. Maren forced air into her lungs. Room clear, she said. Her voice barely carried. But inside, she knew nothing was clear. Nothing at all. They pulled the boy out, half hidden in Lewis' arms as the team regrouped. Ramos muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Always kids, always in the crossfire. Arlen's jaw worked, silent, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. Maren stood apart, rifle across her chest, staring at the dust curling under her boots. They saw another mission, another casualty avoided, another number to mark on a report. She saw a ghost reborn. And she knew, before this mission ended, that boy would shatter her silence. Why did the boy's silence weigh more than the gunfire had? They moved out of the compound in a staggered line, smoke still curling from shattered windows behind them. The village was quieter now, not safe, never safe, but quieter. The kind of quiet that presses against the skin, waiting to break. Lewis carried the boy. The child clung to his vest, small hands gripping straps, head tucked into the crook of the medic's neck. He hadn't made a sound since they pulled him from the dark. Not a cry, not a word, just those wide, hollow eyes. Ramos limped, blood drying on the sleeve where shrapnel had torn his arm. He kept muttering about Phoenix, about the shop he'd opened with his brother, about how no desert in the States looked anything like this. His voice tried for casual, but it trembled at the edges. Arlen stalked ahead, posture sharp, scanning every rooftop, every alley. He hadn't said a word about the boy, not one. And Maren walked in the rear, rifle steady, but her eyes never leaving the child. Because he looked so much like him. The one she couldn't save. The one whose face still woke her in the middle of the night, slick with sweat, heart pounding, years after the mission had ended in smoke and screams. Her boots crunched gravel. The boy's grip on Lewis tightened when a door slammed somewhere in the village. Maren's throat constricted. She forced herself to look away, to scan the alleys, the rooftops, anything but those eyes. But her chest burned with every breath. They reached a narrow lane where the walls pressed close, the air heavier with dust. Arlen raised a fist, signaling a halt. The team froze, rifles raised. The boy shifted, a small whimper escaping him this time. Lewis murmured something low, soothing, though his own hands trembled just slightly. Maren watched silent. Her mind kept circling the same thought. She should have told them what this place meant, who she had seen here before, why this boy's face wasn't just chance. But silence had always been her shield. Words were too dangerous. Words could unravel everything. So she bit her tongue until she tasted iron. Arlen motioned them forward again. The lane opened into a courtyard where the ground was cracked, an old well sinking into one corner. A woman's scarf lay abandoned on the stones, dust already settling over its bright fabric. Ramos bent to pick it up, turning it in his hands. She left fast, he muttered. Lewis gave him a look. Don't dwell. Can't help it, Ramos said, voice softer now. Every time I wonder if it's the last thing someone touched. He tucked the scarf into his vest, almost tenderly. Maren watched the gesture, unexpected in its gentleness. Ramos, the joker, the loudest voice, carrying someone else's forgotten scarf like a relic. She filed it away, quietly, another reminder that everyone carried their ghosts differently. A crack echoed suddenly, sharp against stone. The team dropped, rifles sweeping. Another shot followed, chipping stone near Arlen's shoulder. Roof, Maren hissed, sighting the flash. They returned fire, bullets tearing into plaster. A figure toppled, limp, crashing down the slope of the roof. The silence after was violent. The boy pressed his face tighter into Lewis' neck. Arlen swore under his breath, "We're burning daylight, move." They pushed onward, tension riding their shoulders. The streets twisted, each turn promising ambush, each shadow thick with threat. But Maren's real battle wasn't with the rooftops. It was inside her chest. Because every corner brought her closer to the place she remembered too well. And the boy's silence only deepened the echo of her failure. When they finally paused in another square, Arlen signaled a halt. The team crouched in cover, catching breath. Lewis eased the boy down onto a step, kneeling in front of him. "Water," he said to Ramos, who tossed him a canteen. Lewis held it out, murmuring soft encouragement. The boy stared at it but didn't move. Maren's throat tightened. She could see the boy's hands shaking, so small, so thin. She knew that kind of silence, not refusal, but fear so deep it locked the body. Lewis glanced back at her. "You try," he said. The request hit her like a strike. She froze. "Why me?" "Because he won't even look at me," Lewis said simply. His eyes searched hers, sharp, knowing. "Try." The air felt heavier. Maren knelt slowly, lowering her rifle. The boy's eyes flicked to her, just for a second before darting away. She held the canteen out. Her hand shook. "Here," she said softly. The word felt foreign, fragile. The boy hesitated. Then slowly his hand crept forward. Small fingers brushed the metal, trembling before pulling it close. He raised it to his lips, sipping cautiously. Maren's chest ached. Because for a heartbeat it wasn't this boy. It was the other, the one she had failed. Her eyes stung, but she blinked hard, forcing it back. Lewis watched her carefully. He saw too much. When the boy finished, Maren stood quickly, rifle back in her hands. "We should move." Arlen's voice cut sharp. "Agreed, we're not here for charity." Something in his tone stung, cold, dismissive, but she bit her tongue. The unit pushed on, weaving through another stretch of alleys. The boy walked now, small hand gripping Lewis' sleeve. He didn't look at Maren again. The sun climbed higher, burning against stone. The air shimmered with heat, dust clogging every breath. They reached the edge of the village, where the land opened into jagged hills. Their extraction was miles ahead, across broken ridges and valleys that offered no cover. Arlen scanned the horizon, jaw tight. "We push hard, no stops, stay sharp." Ramos groaned. "Great, just a nice hike through hell." But his eyes flicked to the boy, softer than his words. They moved out. The desert swallowed them, endless and harsh. Maren fell into rhythm, boots crunching, pack heavy, rifle biting into her shoulder. The boy stumbled often, Lewis steadying him each time. His silence grew louder than the wind. Her thoughts churned. She could keep it buried, keep her secret sealed until the mission ended, until they lifted out, until the boy was someone else's responsibility. But every time she looked at him, she knew silence couldn't last forever. Because this boy wasn't coincidence, he was proof. And proof demanded truth. The sun beat down, sweat streaked dust across her skin, her chest burned with each breath. They crested a ridge, the land falling away into a valley below. And there, rising from the rocks, was another plume of smoke, dark, ominous. Arlen froze, scanning. His voice came low. "That's not in the brief." Maren's pulse hammered, because she knew exactly what burned there. But she stayed silent. For now. Why did her stomach twist the moment she saw the smoke? The others treated it as a threat, a complication in the plan, another hazard in an already hostile desert. But for Maren, it wasn't just another signal of violence. It was recognition, memory rising from the earth in a black column. They crouched low on the ridge, the valley stretching wide beneath them. The sun hammered the rocks, shadows short and harsh. The smoke climbed steadily from a cluster of half-collapsed structures near the far edge of the valley, too small for a base, too remote for a proper village. Arlen studied it through binoculars, his jaw tight. Unscheduled contact, Could be enemy fallback, could be civilians, could be both. Lewis shifted beside him, sweat streaking his brow. The boy leaned against him, eyes fixed on the smoke as if he knew it too. Ramos spat dust from his mouth. So what? We detour, or we keep to extraction and pretend we didn't see it. No one answered at first. The silence stretched heavy. Maren's throat burned. She wanted to speak, to say what she knew, to tell them that the smoke wasn't random, wasn't coincidence, that it meant something. But the words locked in her chest. Arlen lowered the binoculars. His voice came clipped, decisive. We clear it, no loose ends. Ramos groaned, muttering something about Phoenix again. Lewis adjusted his grip on the boy, nodding reluctantly. Maren said nothing. She only watched the smoke and felt the old ache sharpen. Because she had stood in that place once before, and she knew what they would find there. The descent into the valley was brutal, rocks shifting under boots, the sun a merciless weight on their backs. The boy stumbled often, and Lewis half-carried him, murmuring soft words each time. Ramos kept cracking half-hearted jokes, his voice thinner with every step. Arlen moved like stone, sharp and unyielding, his silence heavier than orders. And Maren counted her breaths, forcing each one steady. Because with every step closer to the smoke, she felt her silence splintering. The structures loomed larger, old stone walls blackened with soot, doorways gaping like broken teeth. The air smelled of burning wood, charred earth, something sharper beneath. Arlen raised a fist, halting the unit. They crouched low behind a jagged outcrop, scanning. The smoke curled from a collapsed roof near the center. No movement, no sound. Ramos flank right, Hale take left, Lewis with me, eyes sharp. Maren nodded, though her chest tightened. She moved low, rifle steady, circling wide. The silence of the place pressed on her skin, wrong in a way she couldn't name. Her boots crunched ash. She slipped into the shadows of a half-standing wall, eyes sweeping corners. No figures, no weapons, just the remnants of something already destroyed. Until she saw it. A symbol burned into the stone, half hidden by soot but unmistakable. Her pulse spiked. It was the same mark she had seen years ago, the night everything had gone wrong, the night she had lost him. Her stomach dropped. She forced herself forward, circling back toward the others. They converged near the collapsed roof, the smoke thicker here, heat rising from blackened beams. Lewis scanned the rubble, his voice low. Someone was here recently, fires too fresh. Ramos kicked at the ash and left in a hurry. Arlen crouched, fingers brushing the scorched earth, his eyes narrowed, or not at all. As if summoned, a sound broke the silence, a cough, weak, human. The team snapped to alert, rifles raised. Maren's chest froze. The cough came again, from beneath the collapsed roof. Lewis dropped to his knees, pulling at the charred beams. "Help me," he barked. Ramos swore but jumped in, levering a heavy plank aside. Together they uncovered a figure, a man, half-buried, clothes burned, skin blackened with soot. He gasped, eyes wild, chest heaving. Lewis moved fast, checking pulse, dragging the man clear. He's alive. The boy clung tighter to Lewis' leg, eyes wide. Arlen loomed over the man, voice hard. "Who else is here? Speak." The man coughed, blood staining his lips. His eyes rolled, finding Maren. And froze. Recognition flared. Her blood turned to ice. He rasped something in a language the others didn't understand, but she did. Her name. The sound of it broke her. Arlen's head snapped toward her. What did he say? Her throat locked, she couldn't answer. The man reached a trembling hand toward her, eyes pleading. Words spilled, broken but clear to her alone. "You came back." Her vision blurred, the world seemed to tilt. Lewis' gaze darted between them, sharp. "Hale, you understand him." She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "No, he's delirious." But her voice cracked. Arlen's eyes narrowed. He didn't push, not yet. The man coughed again, harder, blood bubbling at his lips. His hand dropped, his chest heaving shallow. Lewis pressed cloth to his wounds, working fast, but his eyes flicked up at Maren, and the question there was louder than words. Who was she hiding? The boy edged closer to her as if drawn. His small hand brushed her sleeve. Her chest caved in. Because she could feel it now, the truth pressing to the surface, clawing at her silence. Arlen's voice came low, dangerous. If you know something, hail, now is the time. Her mouth opened, but nothing came. The man gasped one final word, sharp, guttural. A name, not hers, another. A name that stabbed through her chest like steel. And then he went still. Lewis sagged back, face grim. He's gone. Silence crashed over them. Arlen's eyes drilled into her. What was he saying? Her lips trembled. Nothing, just dying words. It was a lie. And she knew Arlen didn't believe it. The team regrouped, the boy silent at Lewis' side. Ramos muttered curses, shaking ash from his hair. Lewis packed his kit, face hard. Arlen gave no orders, only that sharp stare that cut deeper than bullets. Maren stood apart, her heart breaking against her ribs, because the man's words still echoed inside her skull. You came back. And the name he spoke, the name she had buried with her silence, was not supposed to exist anymore. She looked at the boy, at his hollow eyes. And she knew the storm inside her could not be contained much longer. The desert wind shifted, carrying smoke into the sky. And for the first time, she wondered if she would survive her own truth. The valley gave nothing back but silence. The smoke thinned as they moved, fatting into the vast, unbroken desert. Behind them, the collapsed ruins smoldered in the heat, a black mark against the endless tan. Ahead, the ground stretched barren, shimmering under the sun. They walked in single file, the boy in the middle, Lewis steadying him with one hand. Ramos dragged his boots, muttering curses under his breath. Arlen led, steps measured, posture rigid. And Maren trailed just behind Lewis, her pulse still uneven from the ruins. No one spoke, not about the dying man, not about the words he had said. The silence was thicker than the air. But Maren felt Arlen's eyes on her even when he wasn't looking back. She felt Lewis' gaze, softer but searching, each glance a question he wouldn't ask aloud. Even Ramos, restless and impatient, shot her sideways looks when he thought she wasn't watching. And the boy clung to Lewis, but when he turned his face toward her, his eyes were mirrors, too knowing for his age. Her chest tightened, she forced her breathing slow. But inside the words screamed, you came back. She bit them down until her jaw ached. They pushed through the afternoon, heat a constant weight on their backs. Sweat-streaked faces, soaked uniforms, dust-coated throats and tongues. Every step felt heavier than the last. When Arlen finally raised a fist to halt, they collapsed into what little shade a jagged ridge offered. Ramos dropped to the ground, ripping his pack open. Lewis eased the boy down gently, giving him water in careful sips. Maren sat with her back to the rock, rifle across her knees. She watched the horizon, but her mind replayed the man's voice, his hand reaching, his eyes burning with recognition. She didn't realize Arlen had moved until his shadow stretched across her. Her head jerked up. He stood over her, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. You knew him. Her stomach flipped. No. Arlen's eyes narrowed. Don't lie. She forced her voice steady. He was delirious, dying, he didn't know what he was saying. But her tone was wrong, too fast, too sharp. Arlen's silence was worse than his words. He studied her, eyes drilling through every layer she tried to hold. Then he crouched, voice low enough only she could hear. We don't keep secrets out here, Hale. Secrets get people killed. If you're hiding something, you put us all at risk. Her breath caught. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I'm not hiding anything. Another lie. Arlen stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, turning away, but she could feel it, the suspicion cemented in him now, heavier than ever. Ramos cracked a laugh from the other side of the shade. Well, isn't this fun? Heat stroke, dead villages, mystery men choking out ghost words. Best damn deployment of my life. Lewis shot him a look. Shut it. Ramos shrugged, biting into a ration bar. Just saying, we're off map and running blind, but sure, let's keep chasing smoke. Arlen ignored him. He knelt beside the boy instead, checking his pulse, his small, burned hand. The boy watched him silently, lips pressed tight. Maren's chest ached. She couldn't look away. Because she knew the boy wasn't random. He wasn't a stray, wasn't coincidence. The way he looked at her wasn't chance. He was a tether to the past she had buried. And the ruins, the dying man, the name whispered in blood, all of it was dragging that passed back into daylight. She closed her eyes, tilting her head against the rock. Her silence felt like a noose tightening. As the sun sank lower, Arlen gave the order to move. They rose stiffly, packs hoisted, weapons slung. The boy stumbled but caught himself, Lewis steady at his side. They walked again, shadows stretching long behind them. The desert shifted with the falling sun, heat bleeding into sharp cold. The silence pressed heavier. And then at last Lewis broke it. His voice was quiet, pitched only for her. You understood him. Maren's chest tightened, her steps faltered. Lewis didn't look at her, his eyes fixed ahead. Don't deny it, I saw your face. She swallowed hard. He was incoherent. Lewis' jaw tightened. He said your name. Her blood went cold. Lewis finally turned, his gaze sharp, steady. Who was he? Her throat locked. The truth sat heavy, choking. But before she could speak, Arlen called back, voice clipped. Eyes up, ridge ahead. The moment shattered. Lewis stared at her one more second, then turned away, guiding the boy forward. She followed, legs numb, heart pounding. The ridge loomed dark against the dimming sky. They climbed in silence, the boy stumbling often, dust clinging to sweat and ash. At the top they froze. Below lay another cluster of ruins, larger than the last, stone walls rising jagged against the desert floor. But this time there was no smoke, no fire, only stillness. And yet Maren's stomach dropped the moment she saw it. Because she recognized this place. Not just vaguely, not from blurred memory, she knew it. Every stone, every broken wall. Her breath caught. It was where everything had ended. Her knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself still. The others scanned the ruins, tense. Ramos muttered a curse. Lewis adjusted his grip on the boy. Arlen's jaw tightened, eyes sharp. No one spoke. But inside her chest, the silence broke into a roar. She wanted to scream, to tell them to stop pretending. But her voice stayed locked, strangled by fear. Because once she spoke, there would be no taking it back. The past would crash into the present. And the boy's eyes, too knowing, too familiar, told her she could not outrun it. Not anymore. The wind cut across the ridge, cold and sharp. And Maren felt it, the weight of her silence fracturing. Cracks spreading. The truth pressing to the surface. The descent was slow, deliberate, each step carrying them closer to the skeleton of a place Maren had hoped never to see again. Stone walls jutted like broken teeth from the earth. Empty windows stared hollow, glass long gone, frames rotting. Rusted beams twisted from collapsed roofs, stretching toward the fatting sky like arms frozen in anguish. The air was different here, thinner, quieter, as if even the wind hesitated to enter. Arlen raised a fist. They stopped just inside the perimeter, weapons up. The boy clung tighter to Lewis, eyes darting at shadows. Ramos shifted his weight uneasily, muttering under his breath. Maren's pulse pounded in her ears. She knew where the side street curved. She knew where the fountain had once stood, though now it was cracked stone filled with sand. She knew the shape of the courtyard ahead, even under rubble. Because once, she had stood here with someone who had trusted her. And that trust had died with fire. Her throat closed. She forced the rifle tighter into her shoulder, trying to drown memory with weight. "Clear it," Arlen ordered quietly. His voice echoed too loud in the hollow air. They moved in teams, methodical. Ramos swept left. Lewis guided the boy behind him, checking each opening with short bursts of light. Arlen pressed forward, steady as stone. Maren covered their flank, though her eyes strayed. Every shadow seemed alive, every crumbled doorway a mouth ready to speak the past aloud. She remembered screams here, not imagined, real, flesh burning, stone collapsing, the smell of blood mixing with smoke. The moment her choices, her silence, had carved scars she had carried ever since. Her breath caught when Lewis whispered from ahead, "Movement." Every weapon rose, barrels cutting through the dark. But when light hit, it was only a dog. Skinny, ribs sharp under its skin, eyes reflecting pale. It bolted, vanishing into cracks. The silence after was worse. Ramos chuckled, nervous. Hell of a guard dog, his voice cracked, betraying the laugh. No one answered. They pushed deeper. The boy stumbled once, catching himself on Lewis' sleeve. Maren's chest twisted at the sight, his small fingers gripping with desperate trust. She swallowed. Arlen raised his hand again. They halted in what remained of the courtyard. Half-walls leaned at angles, broken by roots that had forced their way through cracks. The fountain lay shattered, pieces scattered like bones. And there at the far end, a doorway still stood, stone frame intact, black inside. Arlen's gaze fixed on it. "That's our shelter for the night." Ramos groaned, "Hell of a bed." But Arlen didn't flinch. He gave orders crisp, direct. Ramos and Lewis would sweep the far side. Maren would take rear watch with the boy near her. The boy who stared at her again, unblinking, as if waiting for her to admit what neither of them could say aloud. Her hands trembled once. She hid it by adjusting her rifle. When night fell, they gathered in the doorway's shadow. The roof above was half gone, but walls shielded them from wind. A small fire glowed low, careful not to give away light. They sat in a circle, Arlen, eyes sharp even in the dim, Ramos restless, flipping a small knife in his hand, Lewis steady, keeping the boy close. And Maren. She felt their gazes orbit her. Even unspoken, the questions filled the air. Finally, Ramos broke it. "So, we gonna talk about the ghost back there or keep pretending it didn't happen?" Arlen's jaw tightened. Lewis shot him a warning look, but Ramos shrugged. "Come on," the guy knew her name. He wasn't just spitting nonsense. Maren's heart slammed. Arlen spoke, voice low, "Enough." But Ramos pressed. "No, seriously, what's she hiding? You know, don't you?" He looked at Arlen. "You can see it too." The fire popped, sparks snapping. Maren's mouth was dry. Words clawed for release, but she stayed silent. Lewis finally cut in, voice calm but edged. "Shut it, Ramos." Ramos laughed, bitter. "Oh, I get it. Everyone wants to play hero for her. But what if she's dragging us into something we don't walk out of?" Arlen's voice cut like steel. "Enough." Ramos leaned back, shaking his head. "Secrets in the field get people killed. That's all I'm saying." Silence after, heavy. Maren didn't breathe. The boy shifted closer to Lewis, curling against his side. His small eyes, though, stayed locked on her. She couldn't stand it. She turned away, staring into the darkness beyond the ruined wall. Her chest ached with memory. The screams, the fire, the choice she hadn't made, the one she should have. Her silence then had cost lives. And her silence now, it would cost trust, maybe more. She closed her eyes. "Say it." The words built in her throat, a dam straining. But fear sealed them in place. If she spoke, they would see her differently. Not a soldier, not one of them, but something else, something broken. her hands curled tight around the rifle. The night stretched long, wind moaned through cracks, fire burned low, embers glowing red. One by one they drifted to uneasy sleep. Except Maren. She sat awake, watching the shadows, listening to the boys' breathing, the echo of old screams in her head. Every creak of stone sounded like memory trying to walk again. And she realized something with a chill that crawled her spine. The ruins weren't empty. Not truly. Somewhere in the silence, the past waited. And it would not stay buried much longer. The dream came first. Flames roaring, walls cracking, screams swallowed by fire, a child's hand reaching, slipping from hers, and her voice raw, screaming a name until her throat broke. Maren woke with her heart pounding. The fire was embers now, faint glow in the ruins. Shadows stretched jagged across stone. The others slept fitfully, restless even in exhaustion. But the boy was awake. He sat upright beside Lewis, knees drawn up, eyes wide, and he was staring at her. Not with fear, not with confusion, with knowing. Her chest ached. She turned away, pressing her back to the cold wall. But even with her eyes closed, she felt it, the weight of his gaze, burning through every defense she had built. Sleep never returned. When dawn cracked pale across the horizon, Arlen stirred first. His movements were precise, efficient as always. Ramos groaned, muttering curses at the cold. Lewis rose slower, checking the boy's bandages before anything else. And Maren, she hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. She was brittle glass stretched thin. Arlen caught her eyes once. The silence between them was sharp. They packed quickly. Water low, rations thinner. The desert beyond the ruins shimmered under morning heat. But Arlen didn't call them forward immediately. He stood at the edge of the courtyard, staring at the crumbled walls as though listening to something no one else could hear. Finally he spoke, voice clipped. "We're not alone out here." Ramos stiffened. "Enemy." "Tracks," Arlen answered. "Fresh. More than one set they've been through here." The air thickened. Lewis adjusted his rifle, jaw tight. "How close?" Arlen's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "Close enough." They moved fast after that. No wasted words, no dragging feet. Weapons ready, eyes scanning every shadow. The boy struggled to keep up, but Lewis wouldn't let him fall. Maren followed in silence, but her mind wasn't on enemies. It was here, this place. Every corner they turned was another knife twisting deeper. The courtyard where she'd lost them. The alley where she'd hesitated. The archway where she'd chosen silence over truth. She could see it as if it were happening again. Not ghosts, memories, alive, vivid, screaming. Her breathing hitched. She forced it down, focusing on the crunch of boots, the scrape of stone. But the past clung tighter, pressing, demanding. When they stopped to rest near midday, the tension finally cracked. Ramos threw his pack down with a grunt. "Tell me I'm not the only one who feels like bait on a hook." Arlen shot him a sharp look, but Ramos pressed on. "Come on. Tracks in the sand, ruined villages, dying men who know our names. You don't think someone's stringing us along?" Lewis frowned. "That's enough." But Ramos turned on Maren, his voice sharpened, cutting. "No, let's ask her, since everything seems to circle back to her. The man at the first ruins, the boy, this place." Maren froze. Arlen's tone was warning. "Ramos." But Ramos was already packing, knife flashing in his hand as he pointed it toward her. "I want to know why we're risking our necks for her secrets. She's hiding something. Anyone with eyes can see it." Silence pressed heavy. Lewis stepped between them, steady but firm. "Back off." Ramos laughed, bitter. "Of course you defend her, but tell me, Lewis, what happens when her silence gets us killed?" The boy flinched at the sharpness in his voice. He pressed closer to Lewis, small hands gripping his sleeve. And Maren felt the words rising in her throat. She couldn't stop them anymore. Her voice broke the silence, raw and unsteady. He was my brother. The air stilled. Ramos froze mid-step. Arlen's head turned, eyes narrowing. Lewis looked back at her slowly, as though he had known but hadn't wanted to believe it. Her chest heaved. She couldn't take it back now. "The man at the ruins," she said, voice trembling. "He was my brother." Silence, only the wind moving through broken stone. Ramos blinked, knife lowering. "What the hell are you talking about?" Her throat ached, but she forced the words out. "Years ago, before all this, he was taken, I thought." Her voice cracked. "I thought he was dead." Lewis' eyes softened, but Arlen's narrowed further. "And the boy?" Her gaze faltered. She looked at the child clinging to Lewis. His eyes met hers, wide, unblinking. Her heart clenched. "I don't know," she whispered. But she did. Deep down, she did. Arlen's jaw tightened. His voice was ice. "You should have told us." Her voice broke, soft but fierce. "Would it have changed anything?" "Yes," Arlen snapped. "It would have changed everything." The weight of his words crushed her. Lewis finally spoke, quieter, steadier. "She was trying to protect us, or herself, maybe both." Ramos shook his head, muttering, "This is insane." But no one answered him. Because the silence had changed. It was heavier now, sharp with something new, truth, raw and jagged, finally tearing free. Maren's shoulders sagged. She had carried it too long, the silence, the weight. And now that it was out, she felt both lighter and more afraid than ever. Arlen stared at her one last time, then turned away. "We move now." They gathered their packs, weapons ready, but the air between them had shifted, trust fractured, lines drawn. As they pushed back into the desert, Maren stayed near the rear. The boy glanced at her over his shoulder, eyes unreadable. And she wondered if breaking her silence had saved them, or doomed them all. The desert swallowed sound. Boots crunched, rifles clinked, but even those small noises felt wrong against the vast emptiness. They moved in a broken line, shadows stretched long across the sand. The sun bled low, orange giving way to red. No one spoke. Not Ramos, who usually filled silence with sarcasm. Not Lewis, steady guardian of the boy. Not even Arlen, who always had orders ready. Maren trailed at the rear, her rifle heavy, her throat raw from truths finally spoken. The air between them was different now. Brittle, splintered. She felt it with every step. Suspicion pressing from Arlen, unease radiating from Ramos, quiet watchfulness from Lewis. And the boy. Always the boy. When his eyes met hers, it was as if he were waiting, for her to speak again, for her to finish what she had started. But she didn't, couldn't, not yet. The horizon rippled. At first it seemed like heat, but Arlen's hand went up sharp. They froze. Dust swirled faint in the distance. Shapes moved within it. Figures. Arlen's voice was low, tight. Contact. Weapons came up, hearts quickened, the boy's breathing hitched. The figures grew clearer, men scattered, armed. Their silhouettes jagged against the setting sun. Maren's blood ran cold. She knew their gait, their weapons, even their voices as they called across the sand. She had seen them before. Once they had dragged her brother into fire. Once they had left this very place in ruins. Her chest locked. The past had caught up. Ramos hissed, "We're outnumbered." Arlen's jaw flexed, "Positions, hold." They slid into cover, broken walls, shallow ridges of stone. The boy huddled tight beside Lewis, who crouched low, shielding him with one arm. Maren pressed her cheek to her rifle, eyes steady down scope, but her hands trembled. Because through the scope she saw faces she remembered, older, harder, but the same, ghosts of that day, alive and armed. Her brother's killers. Her lungs stuttered. Arlen's voice snapped in her ear, "Focus, Hale." She bit hard on her lip until she tasted iron. Focus. She had to. Gunfire cracked. Dust exploded near Ramos' cover. He cursed, firing back. Arlen's shots were precise, measured. Lewis kept his head low, returning fire only to keep the boy safe. Maren squeezed the trigger. One target dropped. Another flinched back. But her vision blurred with memory, flames, screams, her brother's hand slipping from hers. Her shots grew ragged. Arlen barked, "Steady." But she couldn't steady, not here, not now. Because the boy's scream cut through everything. She whipped her head. He was crying, clutching Lewis, eyes locked on her. And in that instant, she saw him not as a boy in ruins, but as the echo of the child she hadn't saved. Her brother's son. The truth hit like shrapnel. Her breath shattered, her grip faltered. Lewis looked at her, wide-eyed, the realization dawning in his gaze too. And in that frozen heartbeat, the world roared. A shot tore into the wall near the boy. Stone splintered, dust spraying. He cried louder, small body shaking. Maren didn't think, she moved. She threw herself out from cover, crossing open ground. Bullets whipped past, sand exploding at her feet. Arlen shouted her name. Ramos swore. But she didn't stop. She reached Lewis, grabbed the boy, pulled him close to her chest. Her body became shield, her breath ragged. Gunfire raked around them. Pain seared her shoulder, hot and deep. She staggered but held firm. Arlen's voice roared orders. Ramos laid down cover fire, screaming curses at the shooters. Lewis dragged them back toward better shelter. But Maren stayed on her knees in the sand. The boy clutched to her chest, blood running warm down her arm. Her vision swam. The enemy fire slowed, faltered. Shadows pulled back. The dusk cleared enough to show men retreating, slipping away into the desert. Not victory, just absence. The silence after was deafening. Arlen scanned the horizon, weapon raised, until he was sure they were gone. Ramos collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. Lewis knelt, one hand gripping Maren's uninjured shoulder, eyes fierce. "You're hit." She shook her head, breath shallow. "Doesn't matter." But it did. Blood soaked her sleeve, dripped into the sand. The boy trembled against her, face pressed into her chest. She stroked his hair with a shaking hand, whispering words she hadn't spoken in years, words in a language the squad didn't understand. The boy stilled, listening. Lewis looked between them, realization deepening. He's family. Her throat tightened. She nodded once, weak. "My brother's son," she whispered. "I didn't know, not until now." Arlen's face was stone. "You should have told us." Her laugh cracked, broken. "I've lived my whole life not telling." The boy lifted his head, eyes wet, face streaked with dirt. He stared at her with something fragile, trust, maybe, or forgiveness. It broke her. Tears cut clean paths down her cheeks. Arlen turned away, packing the edge of the ruin, fists clenched. Ramos stared at her like she was a stranger. Lewis stayed steady, hand firm on her shoulder. "You saved him," Lewis said quietly. Her eyes closed, "Not like I should have before." Silence stretched. The boy curled closer again, his small weight against her chest anchoring her to the present. And in that stillness she understood. This wasn't about missions or orders or victories written on paper. It was about this, holding the line not with rifles, not with strategy, but with soul. With silence when words failed, with sacrifice when hope broke, with love even when it was hidden under scars. The night deepened. Stars blinked alive above the ruins. They tended her wound, bound tight, though pain throbbed sharp. They spoke little. Each of them carried thoughts too heavy for words. When sleep finally came, it came uneven, fractured. But for the first time in years, Maren let herself rest with the boy's small frame beside her. At dawn they would move again. Enemies would return. The desert would keep demanding. But for this moment, just this, she had done what she hadn't before. She had chosen not silence, not retreat. She had chosen to hold. And maybe that was enough. The wind moved softly through broken stone. The fire burned low. And Maren's eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, carried something new. Not peace, not absolution, but dignity. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.